Hi folks, today we are going to classify quadrilaterals. Quadrilaterals are shapes, two-dimensional shapes that have four sides. We can break down this term, quadrilaterals. The prefix quad means four, and laterals loosely translates to sides. So a quadrilateral is any two-dimensional polygon, a closed shape that has four sides. We can break that down into more categories, which we're going to do today. But first, let's review some vocabulary related to quadrilaterals and related to shapes in general. With regards to lines, lines can either be parallel, which means that if they continued forever, they would never intersect each other. They're at an equal distance apart in the way that they're not going to overlap with each other, even if the lines continue for an infinite amount of space. Whereas perpendicular lines are lines that do eventually intersect with each other. So for example, if you went down to the end of your street and turned right or left, you would be turning onto a perpendicular street. It's one that intersects with your street. When we talk about angles, the three main classifications that we use for angles are right angles, acute angles, and obtuse angles. Right angles are a 90-degree angle, tends to look like a corner. An acute angle is smaller than 90 degrees. I remember it by thinking, oh, cute, because it's smaller. An obtuse angle is larger than 90 degrees. I remember obtuse angles by thinking obtuse in my head, and that reminds me that it's very large. We can also use this word congruent. Repeat after me, congruent. Congruent is just a fancy way of saying the same or equal. We can have congruent shapes. They're the same size with the same dimensions. We can have congruent angles. These are both 90 degrees. We can have congruent length lines. These are both the same length. We can also represent congruency with these little tick marks. You will see these on shapes, specifically the ones we're going to look at today, and that just means that two sides are congruent or equal. So this set of parallel sides is congruent, as indicated by this little tick mark, and this different tick mark on this set of parallel sides of this rectangle means that these two are congruent. So keep those symbols in mind as we further classify quadrilaterals. Let's take a look at a few additional categories of quadrilaterals. You have this quadrilateral classification chart linked into your assignment for today. I added some lines onto it, just like the ones that I went over, to make things a little bit more clear. Quadrilateral is the largest category that we're going to be looking at today. So all of the shapes we look at today are going to fit into the category quadrilateral. But we can break quadrilaterals down further. A trapezoid is a type of quadrilateral that only has one set of parallel sides. So in a trapezoid, typically the top and bottom lines are parallel. So these sides are parallel. And we can have different types of trapezoids. The one we're most familiar with is the isosceles trapezoid, where the sides that are adjacent to the parallel set are the same length. But you could also have a right angle trapezoid as long as the shape has one set and only one set of parallel sides. A parallelogram, on the other hand, has two sets of parallel sides. So this top and bottom are parallel, and so are the sides. A kite does not have any right angles, and its adjacent sides are the same length. So the sides that intersect, these two sides are the same, and these two sides are the same length. We can get more specific. A rhombus is a type of kite because its adjacent sides are equal in length, and it's also a parallelogram because both of its sets of opposite sides are parallel. It has two sets of parallel sides. A rhombus, more specifically, is a parallelogram and a kite that has four sides that are congruent or equal length. A rectangle is also a type of parallelogram. It has two sets of opposing parallel sides, but a rectangle has four right angles, which means that a square is both a type of rectangle and a type of rhombus because it has four right angles and it also has equal sides. All right, let's use this quadrilateral classification information to look at your assignments for today. You are going to be doing pages 295 and 296. On page 295, you're going to be asked to prove or disprove a few statements. So for example, all quadrilaterals have at least one pair of parallel sides. If the statement is true, you would write true. If you can think of even one example that proves it false, that is called a counterexample, and you will write that it is false, and you will draw an example that proves that the statement is false. For the second part here, you're being asked to draw a shape that fits the description if it's possible. If it's not possible to draw a shape based on the description, just write that it's not possible. Let's take a closer look at this next page, page 296. On 296, you have two different parts to complete. Both of them, actually just the sorting part, are going to require you cutting out the sort cards from page 296A. There are a bunch of these quadrilateral sort cards. And notice that each of the quadrilaterals has a letter in the middle. You're going to be recording the letter in the correct place on this page. So the first part is categorizing. In these boxes that have labels, such as quadrilateral, you're going to write the letter of the shape that fits in that category. Quadrilaterals is the first one, and since all of your cards are quadrilateral cards, they even say quadrilateral on them, and you can prove it by counting all the sides, you can just write that all of them are quadrilaterals. I wrote A ... T because the letters go from A to T. The other part of this page involves completing some definitions. So describe what makes a parallelogram its own category of quadrilateral, what makes a trapezoid its own category of quadrilateral, etc. So for example, a rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. And I went ahead and did another one of these categorizations for you. You're going to look at your cards and find all the squares: rectangles, rhombuses, parallelograms, and trapezoids. The squares, I looked and I found 2. One of them is pretty straightforward. Shape B looks just like a square that we're used to seeing. Shape R is trying to trick me a little bit because it was tilted on its side, but I know that this is a square and not a rhombus because it has 4 right angles, and a rhombus does not have any right angles, and it also has 4 equal sides. This has been Classifying Quadrilaterals.